and welcome to Newsnight, where we speak to major league players in Nigeria's democracy and issues generated from its drive for growth and development. I am Ladi Akeredoluwale. Thanks for joining us. It finally spilled out as the relationship between Nigeria and South Africa is now being tested by the most current spate of attacks in parts of that country, as well as the retaliatory attacks here in Nigeria. But before these events, dramatic as they are, unfolded, the issue of how Nigerians are treated in South Africa, what they do in that country as means of livelihood, as well as other dynamics of the relationship between both countries have been in high focus. It is in that regard that my guest is Nigeria's High Commissioner to South Africa, Ambassador Kabir Bala. Let me say that this interview was conducted just before the most current spate of attacks in parts of South Africa and the retaliation in Nigeria took place. Your Excellency, thank you for your time. Welcome to Newsnight.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ladi.
Now, you've been in the Foreign Service for more than 2.5 decades, and in that time, you've been right across the world. UK, which was where you moved to South Africa from, but before that, you've been in Brazil, you've been in Sudan, you've been in the Netherlands, and of course, you've been in Thailand. So I wonder if it would be right to say that your current posting, would it be right to describe it as your most challenging so far?
Well, you could say so.
Why? Why would you think it is?
Well, it could be because in all the other countries that I have served, Nigeria, I was just an officer working under someone, giving me directions, instructions on what to do. I don't know what it means to be on the seat where you make decisions, where you give instructions, where you give directions. So in South Africa, I am no more an officer. I am giving instructions, I am giving directions, and I take full responsibility. I take liabilities, I take assets. I handle almost all aspects of our relations. So in that particular sense, I would say yes, it could be the most challenging. And of course, you know, all the difficulties that we have, especially on consular relations with the Republic of South Africa, where you have our citizens dying. And of course, when lives are concerned, or lives are lost, properties are being lost, naturally, one will get worried. And especially if you are the one who has the responsibility to handle those matters. For us in the Foreign Service, I think consular matters are not the most glamorous things to handle. You know, we have this baggage that diplomats, we only dine, we wine, and then we wear the best of clothes, and then we interact with the high and mighty. Those are the pictures, the images that you have of diplomats. But if you are handling consular matters, then it's a different kettle of fish altogether. Because you will now be going to the courts, you have to go to the prisons, you have to go for funerals, you have to go for sympathies, condolences, and all the rest of them. You have the good, you have the bad, and all the rest of them. So in that particular sense, then you will say it's very challenging, especially when the every day you hear one death or the other. And maybe the narrative is not going out as to what is really happening in that country.
In
And
those
especially,
circumstances.
yes, and especially when you have to sit behind the green, white, green flag, and somebody tells you that your citizens are doing this, are engaged in all kinds of criminality, maybe all the major criminal activities, they tell you that, oh, your citizens are engaged in this. Naturally, you will be challenged.
And this could possibly be made even more challenging by the fact that you do have concurrent accreditation to Lesotho and Swaziland. I doubt, though, that the number of Nigerians in those two countries are anything like those in South Africa itself, though.
Yeah. Well, I have a concurrent accreditation to the Kingdom of Eswatini and also the Kingdom of Lesotho. We do have Nigerians in all those two kingdoms, but not as much as we have in the Republic of South Africa. So if you have to combine the three of them, and you have to carry all of them, you name them citizens, children, sisters, brothers, mothers, uncles, and all the rest of them, because that's the way I see them. If you have to carry all this, then it becomes even more challenging, and especially where you don't even have maybe the full resources that you require in order to handle these matters. You know, as we say in our business, a foreign policy has a lot to do with domestic situation of your country. If you have challenges, economic challenges in your country, then naturally the resources that will be deployed for you in order to execute the interests of Nigeria and South Africa, in Lesotho and Eswatini, naturally will be limited. And the business of making friends for Nigeria, for any country, is really a very expensive business. You need a lot of resources, not only financial, but even in terms of personnel, in terms of responses that you get as soon as you make a request back home. Naturally, we know what is going on here at home. The economy is in a difficult situation. Need to diversify. Government is relying on one source of revenue, and that affects the resources that is being given to us. But hopefully,
things will improve
as time goes on. We hope that things will improve so that we have the resources that we require in order to prosecute our interests in that country.
Now, one of the scariest things that happened more recently were the figures that came from, I believe, the South Africa Police Service about the number of Nigerians that are either under investigation or are on trial or are in the prisons. Of course, I have you here, so you can give us the precise figures, because some of the media houses quoted 6,089, others spoke about 10,000 in total, but just over 6,000 for drug-related offenses. Now, is any of this correct? And if so, how do you deal with this kind of situation? How have you been dealing with this kind of numbers involving the citizens? You've alluded to that earlier on in the interview where you talk about the challenge of facing this kind of situation. But if the figures are indeed true, if any of these kind of figures are true, how do you tackle this? How have you been tackling this?
Well, you see, these figures were just given to us not quite long, but it's been in the process, because I attended a meeting where the Minister of International Relations and Cooperation of the Republic of South Africa called all the African ambassadors in Pretoria. We had a meeting in April, on the 1st of April and on the 5th of April. And they made a presentation that really got me scared, that all the major crimes, name it: murder, drugs, sexual assault, trafficking, human trafficking, robbery, fraud, and all the rest of them. They gave a sort of figures and graphs. And when I looked at the one relating to drugs, I saw it very high like this. We are almost, I think, maybe number one, according to what was presented to us that day. So I raised the matter there. I made an intervention that for us in Nigeria, we don't condone crimes, whether drug or drug-related or any other offenses. But they made it very clear that the one that worries them the most was that of drug. And I requested for the evidence, that they should give us the evidence, the cases, prosecutions, and all the rest of them. And what they told me at that time was that, look, Mr. Ambassador, we will not want to disgrace you in the midst of your colleagues, but we would rather have a sort of a bilateral meeting with you so that we could share what we have. And I requested for meetings from that time. But you know, in South Africa, there has been a general election, and there has been transition, and all the rest of them. New ministers have just been appointed, and they have taken office. A lot of them are now settling down. So we were not able to have that meeting until very recently. They said, okay, come now, we are ready. We have some figures that we want to share with you. And those evidences or figures that they gave me are sort of confidential because they are still investigating. Investigation is still ongoing.
Which may mean that the figures could possibly go up.
Well, yeah, they could go up and they could come down. But the one that caught my my attention was that of maybe the drug menace they say Nigerians are involved with, which was I think 6,000.
Yes, the figure we have is 6,089.
Yeah, 689. That's what they said. That's what they gave me. That these are the figures they have. But the investigation is still ongoing. These are not convictions. These are just a matter of saying, okay, this is a suspect. We are accusing this of this and that, but not convictions, because these are two different things. When you have conviction, then you know, yes, it's established that, yes, this one is engaged in this. And then I have asked them to really give us more evidences. And they said, yes, they will get back to us. They are still doing a lot of investigation on that. Because naturally there are other Africans who are not Nigerians, who are also engaged in all those crimes they are mentioning. But what concerns me the most
is the Nigerians who are involved.
is the Nigerians that are involved. And of course, how we handle them is for us to first of all get to know who are the people being accused. We have to establish whether if they are actually Nigerians. And then if they are being prosecuted, it is our duty to go to court and witness what is going on there, so that we will be able to say yes and give ourselves the satisfaction that yes, they are being tried fairly, their rights are being protected, because even accused persons and suspects, they have rights and they need to be protected. And I believe our presence in cases like that do help. It gives comfort to.
Yes, but don't you have it? Doesn't it present a problem Because a lot of people who come to South Africa, not a majority, I don't know what the numbers are, but quite a number of people who come to South Africa, going by the reports we get back here, don't even bother letting the embassy know that they are in the country. So the record of you being able to establish whether or not this person is an actual Nigerian, he's here on a visa, or he's here on some immigrant status, or he's seeking asylum, or some other thing, is very difficult to establish even for you. So that when they get accused, and then the embassy gets drawn in, it's very difficult for you to even get to know who this person is because you don't have their records.
Well, that is one of the challenges that we have. You know, if you will recall, maybe some years back, before the introduction of that MRP passport, machine readable passport, and then the e-passport, and then this ECOWAS passport. If you look at the back cover of the passport, it tells the holder of the passport that as a Nigerian, your first responsibility outside Nigeria, if you travel, your first responsibility is to go and identify your consulate or identify your embassy or high commission, as the case may be. It's been there. But with the introduction of the MRPA and then the other passport, I think that aspect was removed. I don't know why it was done like that. But even then, even when we used to have that kind of
stipulation on the
passport, Nigerians, most Nigerians don't want to patronize the consulate or the embassy. For whatever reason, I truly don't know why they don't do it. They only do so maybe when there is a problem. Maybe when they have run into some problem, then maybe that's when they will remember that, oh, we have a consulate, or we have an embassy. Now, the lady who died in that Metcoat hotel in Johannesburg.
The insurance.
Yes, the insurance lady, the deputy director general, I think, Chartered Institute of. Sadly, she came, and her colleagues who attended the conference, we'd never been told. Nobody told us that she was in town. We only got to know after the event that yes, she died, she came for this, for that. So really my appeal to Nigerians, whether you are on official business or you are on a private visit, not only in South Africa, wherever you go, you have an embassy there. Where we do have embassies, try to locate them so that in case you have maybe issues with authorities there, or even some other matters other than just having anything to do with the authorities, you have an embassy, and it's our duty to attend to you. So report, come and say, oh, I'm here, so that if anything happens, we know you are here, and we can establish that yes, you are actually a Nigerian, because there are situations where maybe some countries or some citizens of other countries will want to claim to be Nigerians, but meanwhile they are maybe the citizens of other countries. Perhaps Nigeria being a populous country, so all sorts of people could claim to be Nigerians, but there are ways we could establish whether you are a Nigerian or you are not. And that's why we ask the authorities in South Africa to give us the evidences so that we can interrogate some of the information or some of the data they have, that we could establish that, oh, this one may be a Nigerian, or this one may not be a Nigerian.
Now, it's interesting you mentioned the case of the insurance lady. Have you been given any further briefing? Because the reports indicated that an investigation is going on, but that because the primary evidence, so to speak, which was the corpse, has been brought back to Nigeria and buried. Has that had any impact on the investigation as per the briefings you have gotten, if indeed you have?
Yeah, well, of course, that issue was raised there. They gave us some further insight. But I would want to say that ab initio, the suspicion was that the lady died of natural
Causes.
It was later that investigation was carried out, and that investigation was not carried out by Nigerian authorities or by the consulate or by the High Commission, or it was carried out by the South African police. And they gave us a report that from what they have seen out of the autopsy, the lady died of something that you could say consistent with strangulation. They made that investigation and they gave us the report. So I think this should be very clear that yes, the South African police did the investigation. When originally it was thought that she died of natural causes. But then the corpse was taken out of the country.
Were you informed when that was done?
Well, it was after the event that we received a sort of communication, I think, from the Chartered Institute that they have done this and they are just notifying us that this has happened. So, not that we were notified that the body was taken out of the country, and I think the police thought that they should have again another maybe a second autopsy or something like that, so that they would be 100% sure that yes, she died of strangulation. But the body has been taken already. So I think where we are now is about raising the profile of the investigation to what they call a VIP or high-level profile investigation. And they have assigned a general, I think, a general of the police to be in charge of the investigation. And then they also, I think, are looking for 2 ladies who have been with her until the last moment of towards the end of the dinner that she attended. They want to have a sort of take their statement, because they left the country and they have not been able to take any statement from those 2 ladies. And this is where they are seeking our own cooperation to get those 2 people. We are talking with them and the hotel where they stayed, so that information can be obtained to track them and take their statements.
Now, Your Excellency, let me create a narrative for you. Back here in Nigeria, that case, along with other cases, the way it is spun out is put under general xenophobia. When reports reach Nigeria about anything that leads to fatalities involving Nigerians, is put generally under the umbrella of xenophobia, and as a result, many people are up in arms. including people in positions of authority demanding explanations, asking for action to be taken against the South African authorities, and so on. And people in your position rarely have either the opportunity or the inclination, because in the middle of all the noise, those who actually have the facts seem to get drowned out. Is it the way it's been portrayed? Are Nigerians under attack in South Africa? Are citizens of this country being targeted for attacks in South Africa?
I think I won't say Nigerians are targeted as Nigerians. No, because they are not the only victims of maybe xenophobia. There are other citizens of other countries, Zimbabwe, Malawi, all those SADC members are also victims of xenophobic attacks. And whether xenophobia or murder, robbery, all the rest of them, they are all criminal activities. Xenophobia is a crime. And I think the South African government has also recognized that, yes, something like that do exist. And also criminal activities also do exist. And that's why I think they have a sort of a national action plan to fight these crimes. Now I wonder how anybody will say the lady who died in an hotel, whether she died of xenophobia, whether I say xenophobia or something. I don't know how that could be categorized as. And I think maybe in order for sanity to prevail, I think we shouldn't, naturally when life is involved, people can be emotional. That I accept. But when you are engaged in a relationship between two very major important countries, we need to be a bit circumspect and allow the due process to take its natural course. Naturally, people will want a quick action. As soon as something happens, you want to see results. But there are things that maybe you don't see results immediately. And there are things that you need to do behind the scenes so that maybe investigations are not jeopardized. And maybe we shouldn't also jump to conclusions. We should allow the due process to go on until when we have all the evidences and all the facts and all the figures, then we can now draw our own conclusions. That is my own attitude to it, and that is what I will encourage all Nigerians and all South Africans not to jump to conclusions when things like this do happen. They do happen. And that they should appreciate that, yes, there are also there is also need to allow this due process to take place behind the glare of the public, so that maybe those investigations would not be compromised. I think that is what I will make an appeal to all Nigerians. That we shouldn't just jump to some conclusion, and we shouldn't just allow also the South Africans to jump to conclusions about this event. Naturally, lives and properties are very close to our hearts. They are emotional matters. Life is sacred. Properties also must be protected. There are also other interests, because our interest in South Africa and the interest of South Africa in Nigeria is not only consular matters, really. There are so many other interests that we have.
Speaking of interests, because I wanted to raise that, some of the groups, groups representing either special interests, for want of a better word, like NANS, like NUSA, then groups representing ethnic associations of Nigerians resident in South Africa have been known to be the sources of a great deal of disinformation. As a matter of fact, some of them actually are the ones who send press releases down to Nigeria about the death of this person, the death of the other person, sometimes describing the circumstances as they see it and demanding for action. And sometimes the embassy in South Africa gets targeted in the sense that they say you are doing nothing about it, that you probably have heard and that you've done nothing about it. So here's an opportunity. First of all, I'd want you to address the relationship between the embassy and those groups. And then, when things like this happen, how do you interface with them to get the necessary information if they have it? Or are they just, as you said earlier, representing particular objectives which they want to achieve?
Well, you see, we have a lot of those groups, associations. You have maybe Niger Delta associations. You have the Yoruba Association. You have some Indibo associations, and so many of them. And we do have, since my assumption of office in Pretoria, I have interacted with almost all of them. They come to the office for courtesies, they visit, and when they do have also events, we do attend their events. But for me, I would say they are the representatives of Nigeria in that place, in South Africa. Why do I say so? These are the people that are living with South Africans in their townships, in the cities, and in the locations. And what they do is seen as a reflection of what we are, because they interact intimately with South Africans in their townships. And when I interact with them, I tell them, well, for me, I'm just the official representative of Nigeria in South Africa. I interact with people at the higher level and at the lower level. But for them, they interact with them intimately. And I say to them that, look, you need to represent us there. Show the good side of you. Because whatever you do, the South Africans will look at you and say, ah, yes, this is how Nigerians are. But you should see us also as complementing one another. The embassy is there, and the embassy is there just because you are here. You are in South Africa by your own choice. You decided to be in South Africa on your own choice. Nobody asked you to be there. You decided to be there. For me, government decided to send me there, and I will stay there for a short while. But you have stayed here on your own for maybe upward of 20 years. Some have stayed 10 years, 15 years, and all the rest of them. So you have a duty, you have a responsibility as Nigerians in your association or as individuals to project and enhance the prestige of our own country. That's my own interaction with them. But sadly, some of the people that you interact with regarding the situation there, some of them are no more in South Africa. So it's very difficult when I see that kind of interaction with such people who are no more in South Africa, who are maybe far removed from the situation there. I ask myself, how is it justifiable to have such individuals as people who will provide information on the situation in South Africa? Now you have one of the president, I think, who has been out of the country for over a year. I have seen him being interviewed on the situation in South Africa. But we are the ones that are there. And if we have to say anything, I think we should be talking to people who are actually there, who are witnesses to what is going on there. Not people who have maybe abdicated, who have maybe moved out of the country. Perhaps they want to promote certain agenda or something like that. And I think for me, the relationship between Nigeria and South Africa is an imperative relationship, almost indispensable relationship. And I think we shouldn't just talk or joke with it. We should take it with all the seriousness that that relationship deserves.
This is, I'm happy you talked about that, because that brings me to trade now. There are many thriving South African businesses in Nigeria. But then even the vice president, Professor Shibajo, is quoted as saying that the South African authorities need to create the kind of environment that makes it possible for South African businesses to thrive in Nigeria, in South Africa, for Nigerian businesses. What can you tell us about the situation of trade between both countries as it stands now? I mean, one is the biggest economy on the continent, the other is the second biggest.
Yes. Well, as you know, we have, at the moment, we have so many South African companies and businesses that are thriving in Nigeria. But it's a bit difficult maybe to see a Nigerian company in South Africa at the moment. None you could talk about that is really that big compared to maybe MTN, ShopRite, and all the rest of them.
Is there a reason for that? Do you have any idea why that is so?
Well, I think there have been some attempts by some companies to go to South Africa. I think there are maybe some difficulties, maybe legal, some maybe just legal matters, the way they do their business and things like that. But we have agreements on trade and almost, I think, 29 agreements and MOUs, and a lot of them to do with trade. But yet, we don't see much of Nigerians' businesses there, apart from those who are maybe doing their petty businesses and the rest of them. And that is why, for me, it's really a welcome development that we are going to have, or our president has accepted to visit South Africa in the next maybe 5 weeks, for us to really activate what has been dormant for almost six years.
You're referring to the Binational Commission?
Yes, I'm making reference to the Binational Commission. You know, the last time we had that commission meeting was in 2013, for obvious reasons.
But isn't it part of the problem that at that 2013 meeting it was decided to raise it to a level of heads of state, in which case the heads of each country are the leaders of their respective delegations, and that only when this kind of opportunity you've just made reference to, when you have one president visiting the other, can that kind of meeting now take place. So between you as ambassador in South Africa and your colleague in country, you can't have that meeting anymore in the sense that for it to have decisions, it is now at the level of the heads of state, and until they meet, as you're pointing out now, that's when the commission can be reactivated.
No, you see, it wasn't in 2013 that the decision was taken to upgrade it to the summit level. No, it was in 2016 when President Zuma visited this country. And I think that point was made, or that decision was made in order to highlight the strategic nature of the relationship that we have between Nigeria and South Africa. You know, the agreement establishing the binational commission stipulates that the deputy president of South Africa and the vice president of Nigeria are the two people that will be chairing the binational commission. But from 2016, that decision was taken now, okay, we need to upgrade this because of the strategic nature of the relationship. But if you remember, 2017 couldn't do nothing about it because of perhaps because it's a binational thing. It's not a Nigerian thing alone or a South African thing alone. It has to be a bilateral decision. Our president in 2017, we know his circumstance at that time, so the commission couldn't take place. 2018, election cycle towards 2019. But happily now, election is over in Nigeria and election is over in South Africa. So the situation now is just right for the two heads of state to meet, and they will meet.
You must be very busy putting together the agenda for that.
Yes, we are very busy with that. We have started having some preliminary meetings in Pretoria, and also some preliminary meetings also here in order to set the agenda for the commission to take place. But you will recall now that this is going to be like an inauguration of the commission, because the previous one happens to be at the level of vice presidents, and this one now is going to be about at the level of the two heads of state.
Part of what brought up the binational commission as a subject of discussion is that the information came out to Nigeria that the South African authorities, using their binational commission with Ghana, granted the Ghanaian citizens who were visiting South Africa visa-free entry. And everyone wondered, well, if that binational commission could do that in terms of South Africa, Ghana, why can the Nigerian South African binational commission not do the same? I mean, simplistic argument, but nevertheless, the argument is being made. So that's what brought that up. And I'm sure quite a lot of people will be happy to hear that this commission is being revived, not necessarily for that as a reason only, but for
yeah, surely it's not for that reason alone that it's an agreement that has been there from the time from 2000 as a joint commission, and then later a binational commission at the level of deputy and the vice president, and now it's going to be at the level of the presidents. So it's not coming out of what has happened between South Africa and Ghana. But if that is what we want to have, why not? But you should also know that we have already, I think we are looking at it maybe gradually. We have an agreement between Nigeria and South Africa regarding visa waivers for those Nigerians that are holding diplomatic passport and those that are also holding official passports. That is the starting point. as time goes on, we could consider also maybe visa-free regime, which is not only a Nigerian thing or a South African thing or a Ghanaian thing. I think it's an African thing, really, because there is something like that, that we should have a sort of a common African passport, and then maybe our borders, our citizens to be able to move freely, at least within the within the West African region. Nigerians can move freely, and within the SADC countries, all SADC members, their citizens can move freely without visa. So I think those are the building blocks that we have.
You might have made a number of enemies because the report indicates that you cut out what was traditionally middlemen who offer to be intermediaries between the embassy and people who require consular services, things like visas, or people want travel documents and so on. You engineered a system whereby the middlemen were removed from it, and that many of those people are not happy. I make this reference only because you talk about people having their own objectives and their own agenda that they are pursuing.
Yeah, well, naturally, you see, I have had a lot of experience in this, maybe services, consular services to Nigerians. And I happen to have served in London, where I see a lot of these intermediaries. Naturally, if you try to get them out, there will be maybe a sort of a backlash. But naturally, we have no option other than just to do that, so that we will be able to have sort of services, those services that we do, those concrete services that we do, we provide to our citizens, are accessible to them without let or hindrance, without this middlemen. Naturally, people don't accept those kind of things where someone would want to make this thing as direct as possible. But then we just have to take it that way, because that is what our government wants, and that is what our people also want to have. So we are in the business of making friends, but in the process also we do make enemies, maybe unintentionally. Unintentionally it happens. It comes maybe in the line of our duty. Thus.
Your Excellency, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
That's Newsnight this week. We do sincerely hope that the relationship between Nigeria and South Africa takes a much more positive turn, and all need to work to make that happen. I am Ladi Akiriduluale. Goodbye.